It is now time to introduce one of our two keynote speakers tonight. I first met Belinda Sleeman when she was one of the mentee officials with the National Official Scholarship Program. Belinda has embraced the opportunity to become an official and is a regional Queenslander, starting life out in Rockhampton, and she's going to share her journey as an official with us tonight. Thanks, Belinda. Sorry, her claim to fame. I need to mention that. She was the first female official appointed to do a state league game. So really has got to a highest level possible and is doing a terrific job and being well mentored. You'll meet her mentor later. And I'm going to pass over to Belinda.
Hi, my name's Belinda Sleeman and I'm a match official for the NRL. I started playing touch football in school and then I sort of progressed into refereeing that as well because I was down at the touch field so many nights a week. So I sort of got into the refereeing sphere that way, and then someone suggested to me one day, have you ever thought about, you love rugby league, have you ever thought about being a rugby league referee? And I sort of thought about it and went, well, it's a way for me to be involved in the game that I really enjoy, and so I made some inquiries and got into it from there. I don't ever think I saw it as there's no other female so I can't be involved. I just saw it as something I wanted to try, and they were very encouraging of me joining the association and getting involved, and I don't ever think I stopped at any point and went, this is unusual. I just sort of, I guess I just started and went with it.
Belle as a client, an athlete, she has her good days and her bad days like most athletes do, and it's always good fun with training with Belle. She trains as hard as anyone else, and we always use the term, pound for pound, so Belle's sort of relatively, even though she's the littlest, she trains the hardest, which is good to see. Not many people think that the referees have to train, they just sort of turn up to a game and run a line and hold a flag. We're
out in the field for the whole 80 minutes and we have to, be in front of the play, I guess, essentially. So, there is a lot of training involved. There's a lot of the physical component. We do a lot of gym sessions, a lot of running, a lot of training, and that's the part that I really enjoy. I love that sort of competitive aspect in the training and all the work that goes into being an official off the field.
It's a big commitment, and for these guys who are part-time, they've got to put a lot of hours in outside of their regular jobs to make it work, and obviously try and make a possible career out of it.
Earlier this year I took on a job with Touch Football doing their marketing and communications, which I'm really enjoying at the moment. It's definitely pretty busy. My schedule's pretty busy during the week. I have to be super organised and make sure that I'm getting everything done. I guess the highlight would be my NRL debut back in 2014.
Holdsworth goes wide, there's a reply, Valentine Holmes is in for the Sharks. A female officiating in an NRL match for the first time, Belinda Sleeman.
It's just a great experience, a great moment, I guess, to be involved at the highest level. I get a lot of opportunities to be involved in games at the big stadiums, but I think there was something really special about making my debut at Leichhardt Oval, one of those small suburban grounds. There's a lot of history and nostalgia involved with grounds like that, and I just thought that was really special to probably debut somewhere like that.
In the 3 years that I've seen Belle, I've seen her sort of progress through the ranks, and sort of late last year, this year she started doing the NRL lines and doing more sort of ISC, so Q Cup middles and things like that.
In terms of preparation, as part of the actual game, we sort of arrive there and go through our general warm-up, our sort of pre-game, a little bit of a chat between the team. And then I guess that feeling of running out of the tunnel, it never gets old. That's still the great feeling of running out onto the field, whether it's at a stadium or at a local ground, and that sort of makes you realise why you do what you do.
Moga, short side! They try their luck, a very narrow short side. David Mead's the man.
Well done to that young lady, Belinda Sleeman, the touchy. She could have just said, I don't know, but she made a decision. She said to the rep, no, that's a try. And that's what you want to see, people making decisions.
The accolades that Belle's received shouldn't be sort of labelled just because she's a girl. She's worked hard. She deserves the position she's in. If it was anyone else and they worked as hard as Belle has, they would probably be in the same position.
When I started refereeing, I didn't set out with any intentions to be, I suppose, like a pioneer or anything in terms of being a female official. But I suppose I've come to recognise my role in the game, and that it may encourage other people to become involved, especially young girls to become involved in the game, and I think that's a great thing. If me doing my job can encourage others to become involved or follow the same pathway or do the same thing, then that's something I'm quite proud of. I almost feel like I don't really need to speak now because that's probably my whole story summed up. Hello everyone. I guess I asked Ash to play that video tonight, obviously to give a little bit of background, but there's a lot of points in that which I suppose I'll probably speak to tonight that I guess sum up in a sense how I feel about my career so far, and things that have happened for me. And funnily enough, when Ash asked me to speak tonight, I was actually a little bit hesitant about speaking. I don't always enjoy, I suppose, the public speaking in the media that seems to come with my position in officiating. I've always been really strong on your actions speak louder than your words, and I like to just leave that on the field rather than speaking about it all the time. But I guess, as I said in that interview, I spoke about not necessarily identifying as a trailblazer or, pioneer or whatever words they like to, I suppose, label me as. But I have come to appreciate my role in influencing other people to get involved in officiating. And I think that was probably one of the reasons why, I wanted to speak tonight, obviously to a room full of officials. You guys are already involved in officiating, but you also have that same opportunity to inspire other people to get involved in sport. So, I do find that as an important part of my role. And as I said, I prefer to let actions speak louder than words, and I feel like, me just doing my job and being professional and setting an example for others, should really do that. I guess that's essentially why I was happy to talk tonight. I wanted to share my story with you, not just necessarily the highlights, but things that are important to me, my philosophy around training, preparation, things that have helped me so far in my career that you may be able to pass on to other people wanting to get involved in officiating. To give you a little bit of a background, obviously Nani mentioned I'm from Central Queensland, grew up in Rockhampton, played a lot of touch football growing up in school. There weren't a lot of opportunities to play rugby league in Rockhampton when I was at school, unfortunately, and being a rugby league heartland, I just loved the game. It was, I used to sit down with my dad every weekend and watch rugby league. It was sort of our time together, I suppose. I'm very close to my dad, and that was our sort of special time together, and I just loved the game. And I guess not being able to play, I suppose I wasn't really sure what other avenues there were available for me to get into the game. But obviously playing touch football and then being down at the touch fields 3-4 nights a week, got involved in refereeing touch football. As most people start out, got asked to do a game one night, can you help fill in, which then turns into can you do it every week, can you do it every night. So obviously was pretty heavily involved in refereeing touch football, and then somebody asked me one day, you're a big fan of rugby league, have you ever thought about refereeing rugby league? And I thought, well, no, I actually hadn't, because I'd been involved in touch and loved rugby league, but never really thought of that as an avenue to get into. So obviously made some inquiries and went along to my first course. Funnily enough, I was the only girl in the course of about 30 or 40 boys. But even then, that didn't really intimidate me. I don't think I ever sort of stopped at any point and thought, oh God, I'm the only girl in this room, like this is a really unusual thing for girls to do. I just thought, well, I love the game. I know how to referee a sport now. I don't see any reason why I can't become involved in it. And so obviously sat my course, realised that there were a lot of rules I didn't know, even though, everyone sits on the couch every weekend and thinks they know all the rules. Everybody does that. I realised there was a lot I didn't know about the game, and I had a lot to learn, but I was really excited. Turned up to my first training session on Tuesday night, and there were no mentions of, oh my God, why is there a girl here, or, any of that sort of thing. I was just welcomed as another referee to training. I was expected to do the same training as everybody else. And I think looking back now, I just really, it didn't strike me as unusual at the time, but I'm so grateful that was the way I was accepted into the sport, because for me, I've known nothing different since. I guess just slotting in and learning the ropes like everybody else, I've made sure that throughout my career that I've been treated the same way. And each level I've had conversations with the coaches at the various levels and said, this is how I expect to be treated. I don't want any special favours. I'll do the same work as everybody else. And, you know, it's just come to be expected that I'm just like the same as everybody else. So obviously in Rockhampton, I started, I think my first game was an under-7 or under-8s game out at Gracemere, just outside Rockhampton, and walked out on the field, had no idea what I was doing, no idea where I was supposed to stand, sort of knew the rules a little bit. I still say to this day, I think that refereeing junior rugby league is so much harder than refereeing NRL because there are so many more rules with, you know, safe play code and that kind of thing for the junior players. So I have so much respect for the guys who referee at the junior level. But I remember being so nervous, but I was so excited, and I got out on the field and I thought, wow, how cool is this? Like, I'm in the middle of a game and I'm not even playing. You know, it's just a completely different experience. And I think, you know, I worked through the junior grades, and I don't know what point it was, but at some point I think that competitive edge just took over. And I think, you know, I went from just doing a few games on a Sunday morning to now I want to get to that next level, and I want to start refereeing on Friday nights, and I want to start refereeing on Saturday nights, and I want to do the games that these other guys are doing. And I think, you know, most officials who have any aspiration to get to any level, I'm sure they can attest to that same feeling of wanting to, I suppose, always be better and get to that next level. So I went through the grades in Rockhampton. I got, I think, to sort of secondary school level. There's a pretty good secondary school competition there, which was, I guess, a really good place for me to cut my teeth at that level. And then I met a couple of guys who were in charge of the Rugby League Referees Academy in Brisbane. And I sort of said to them, how do I become, you know, I'm quite keen to progress. How do I get involved in this squad? How do I become a member of this squad? And they said, well, it's a bit difficult, obviously, being in a regional area. You know, we have some guys that are used on the games in regional areas, but if you're really serious about it, you know, you potentially have to move to Brisbane. So I think I met them in November 2008. In January 2009, I turned up to training in Brisbane and said, well, I'm here, I've moved, I'm here and I'm ready to go. And I think I'll never forget the look on their face when I turned up, because they thought, oh God, now what are we going to do with her? We've never had a girl try and be in this squad before. We told her to come down, we didn't think she would, now she's here, what are we going to do with her? Anyway, so I guess that it was a shock to me too, to be honest, because coming from Rockhampton, like our training on a Tuesday night, it's a bit different now, but back when I first started, consisted of, I think, a little bit of running around and then a game of touch football. That was our training session for the night. And then I turned up to Brisbane and we were doing laps and skills and sprints and so many things. And I remember walking away from that first training session going, oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to do this every week. But I think, again, that competitive part of me, I just thought, well, I've come down to this training session. I'm at the back of the group because obviously I've come, you know, from Rockhampton where I'm not doing a lot of that sort of training. I was at the back of the group and I thought, well, I'm just going to keep chipping away and slowly, hopefully, move my way from the back of the group to a bit further in front, which I did. So I ended up training we had training Tuesdays and Thursday nights, so I trained 2 nights a week, every week, for 4 months before they said, look, we're going to give you a go. We're going to put you in the squad and give you your first game. So I think it would have been very easy during the first 4 months to give it away for a variety of reasons. Obviously, it probably took me a little bit longer than maybe some others to get into the squad. And secondly, just the level of training now that I was exposed to, it was pretty tough and definitely a shock to the system. So I guess I just knew that that's where I wanted to be. And once I turned up to that first training session, saw the other guys, who were doing the top level in the state, I thought that's where I want to be. And I guess I just kept chipping away until I got to the point where they offered me an opportunity to be involved in sort of like the initial level of the squad, which was the under-20s competition in Brisbane. Since that time, I've worked through the grades in Brisbane, and then into Queensland Cup, which I'm currently refereeing in now, and then through to getting a part-time contract with the NRL at the end of 2013. And then I guess ultimately making my NRL debut in 2014. There have been so many, I guess, great experiences along the way. My debut obviously being one of them, but some of the other highlights have been, last year I was fortunate enough to be involved in the Rugby League World Cup, which was in Australia and New Zealand, and I think to be involved in a tournament at that level in your own country was really special, and obviously something I'll probably never get to do again in my career. So I was certainly, really grateful for that opportunity. And I guess the interesting thing is everybody knows the scrutiny and the pressure that we're under in the NRL week to week. If you watched any NRL on the weekend, I'm sure you've heard all about it. But I guess the difference with the World Cup, and this may seem strange, but it just seemed like there was less pressure and less scrutiny, and everyone was just there to just enjoy themselves. The passion of those Pacific Island nations and their hymns and their, the chants before the game and all those kind of experiences. I think when I look back on my career, when I eventually retire, I think they'll be sort of the games that will stand out in my mind, and the things that I remember is just those experiences that we really enjoy. And I think sometimes, we get so caught up in, the week-to-week grind of what we do that we forget to just sit back and really just enjoy those times. And I was lucky enough during that World Cup experience to just be able to sit back and go, wow, this is a really amazing experience. And I want to touch on that a little bit later, because you can get so caught up in the angst and the week-to-week pressure, and really lose sight of why we actually do what we do. One of the other experiences which I just wanted to touch on was the experience I had last year of going to Papua New Guinea to referee a game. Again, I think it's one of those things I'll look back on at the end of my career and realise what an amazing experience that was. I guess just understanding the way females are treated in that country, and still treated to this day, which is pretty sad, really. Me just doing my job that I do every single week, I didn't do anything different, but me just being out on that field and bossing around 26 guys was just such a big deal to those people. And I thought that it just made me feel really proud, I guess, of my role, and that I didn't have to do anything special and make a difference in a country like that. So yeah, for me that was a really special moment that I think I'll look back on in years to come and realise, what a difference that really did make. I wanted to touch on, I mentioned before about, the role that we play in encouraging junior officials and getting officials involved in the game. People often ask me, how I prepare for games. And I think this is a really important part that we can instill in officials from early on. I've always been really methodical in my preparation, probably some people say too much so. But ticking off all the things that, I see as important in preparing for a game every week, always makes me feel really comfortable when I get to the game, knowing that I've done all I can to prepare. And I think too many times we see officials, turn up on the day, they might be running late, they've gone to the wrong ground because they didn't check their appointments and realise where they were, all those kind of things. I think if, instilling in them early on, the discipline and being, prepared and professional in your approach, I think is really important. Because those sort of things are drilled into players early on, and I'm not sure that always carries over to officiating. So it's something I've always been really strong on, especially because for me, balancing between refereeing and touch judging, it becomes quite a long season. Up to 30 weeks really. Often doing multiple games on a weekend, it can become tiring, and I feel if you're not preparing well and you're not looking after yourself in that sense, you're going to struggle to maintain that across the season. So I think the earlier we can reinforce, that sort of thing with younger officials, I think really sets them in a good position for later on. I guess another important thing is I find having the right officiating, work-life balance really important. And Ash mentioned before about the importance of mentors, and for me, I've had some really great mentors so far in my career, but I find that sometimes the most important mentors aren't necessarily within your sport. And for me, finding that right balance has not only been mentors within the sport, but mentors outside of the sport. So personally, I find that my sister has been one of my best mentors, because it's easy to go to a mentor within a sport, if you've got an issue or a complaint or whatever it might be, and they'll give you the answers. But sometimes you just need that fresh approach, that different approach, someone who's not in that week-to-week, situation, and maybe doesn't necessarily understand officiating as well as obviously you do, but might just give you that sort of fresh approach and that different perspective, and I suppose give you a broader approach. And I think that's been really important for me, just finding that right balance. And I think we're always keen to find mentors within the sport, but I think it's important to maybe look outside the sport. Having said that, obviously, you need to find the right kind of mentors within your sport. And for me, that's always been finding people who don't just tell me what I want to hear, but tell me what I need to hear. I think that's really important. Obviously, we need to reinforce the things that we need to fix or can do better, but also finding the balance between things that you can fix, things that you can do better, but things you're doing well as well. I guess, being a mentor isn't just, helping people with their on-field, with their games. It's the overall package, and, making sure that they're handling the balance with their life, all those kind of things. So obviously you guys will be involved in mentoring some junior officials, and I think that's really important, is making sure you're getting an all-round approach, rather than just, I guess, the skill components of the game. I guess I mentioned earlier about not ever wanting to get special treatment, and this has been a really strong point of mine through my whole career. Obviously, there's always been some interest around, I suppose, me being a female in what's been previously a pretty male-dominated sort of area. And I've always been really strong on not receiving special treatment, and I believe that through my career, I haven't. I've made sure that I've always done the same training, the same preparation. I've had the same setbacks, the same disappointments as everybody else, and I think that's really important. That there hasn't been a different pathway for me. It's the only difference, I guess, essentially, is that there's been no female on that pathway before. And that's the way I always look at it. I want to make sure that whatever level I get to, I've done exactly the same things as everybody else to get there. And I guess that can be passed on to any junior official in any sport, to make sure that they're not looking for easier options or special treatment. That it's important that everybody takes the same pathway and works just as hard as everybody else. I think those setbacks and those frustrations, making errors, injuries, all those kind of things, not necessarily getting the games you'd hope for. I'm actually really grateful for those experiences, because I think, what they do is build resilience. And I think, I'm better prepared to deal with different situations, at this stage of my career because of those experiences. They're never easy at the time, obviously, but the most important thing is to learn from them, and we are judged by how we deal with those situations. So as an official, you're judged by how you perform on the field, the decisions you make, whether you're in position to make the call, all those kinds of things. But what you're judged on off the field is how you deal with setbacks, how you take disappointments. They're the times when you truly get a measure on a person's character. And I think it tells you, a lot about their mental strength as well. How will they handle a difficult situation on the field based on how they handle things off the field. Will they melt, or will they stand up and make the tough decisions, with the right attitude? I think there's certainly lessons to be learned there, and the more we can encourage, junior officials or any officials getting involved in the game, to be able to deal with those setbacks. And as I mentioned before about mentors, that's a really important component of that. How you deal with those setbacks and how you actually build resilience from that and turn that around and make yourself a better official. I guess if there's one thing that's been a common theme in my career so far, and probably, to the frustration of some of my coaches at times, I guess I've never been completely satisfied with a performance. And I always say that I don't think any official should ever be completely satisfied with a performance. I'm always looking for areas of improvement and what I could have done better. But as I mentioned before, I think it's important to get the right balance of things that you are doing well, but also things that you need to improve on. In this profession, I think we quite easily always get caught up in the negatives and things that we don't do well, but I think it's important to get that right balance of both. I think part of never being satisfied is having that growth mindset, always wanting to improve and be better than last time. And I always apply that same philosophy to training. So we'll have a set training schedule for a week, but I've always made sure that whatever our training schedule is set, that I've always done more than what's required. And I guess part of that is, as I mentioned before about my preparation, it's really important for me to, at this level, there's not much that separates us. So for me, that's an area where I feel like I can get a bit of an edge if I'm making sure that I'm going above and beyond what's required of me and doing that extra training session or going that extra mile. I think, they're the things that we control. We always get caught up in the things, I guess, that we can't control as officials, but there are things that we can control. And they're the kinds of things that, when I'm talking to younger officials, I always make those points, is that the things that you can control is what separates you from everybody else. And for me, the physical component of that is really important for me. I guess just to finish up, when I talk to younger officials, I quite often ask them, how they're going and, what grade are you doing? What are you doing in training? What have you been up to? And get a gauge on sort of where they're at. And I find that I always like to leave them with two messages that I think, for me, are really important, and the two reasons why I continue to referee. The first one is I just make sure that they enjoy what they're doing. I think, as I mentioned before, too many times we just go through week to week and never really take that moment to stop and think about why we do what we do and the fact that we actually enjoy it. Why would you continue to do this job every week if it wasn't something that you enjoyed? And I suppose I've just made a conscious effort every time I run out onto the field each week. I always take a moment at some point during the game and just stop and remember that, I'm lucky to have this job and that I really do just enjoy what I do. And I always make a conscious effort to stop and, for a moment, obviously not when I'm going to make a big decision, but at some point during the game, stop and just remember that, I'm really lucky to do what I do and I really enjoy this job. There's probably more pressure in being a referee than probably anything else in my life, but I also understand that it's a privileged position and there are so many people that would love to be doing what I'm doing, and I guess I never take that for granted. And the second thing is I always remind them to make sure that they learn something from every experience, every game, every experience. If you're not learning something, you're never going to grow and you're never going to develop. And I always say there's a learning experience in everything, whether it's a game, a training session, a video review session, there's something to learn from somebody else or something to learn from an experience in the game. And, I've never met an official yet who's mastered their craft. And I think, when you stop enjoying what you do and you stop learning from what you do, your time in the sport is probably done. So I think they're the two most important things, to enjoy what you do and to keep learning from every experience.